Recording is in progress.
All right, welcome to the meeting, Lehigh County Board Authority, Lehigh County Authority Board of Directors. Got that right. October 9th, 2023. This meeting is being recorded and is being held virtually as well as in presence of the boardroom and also on the phone. Let's begin with a roll call of board of directors.
Okay, roll call of the board. Brian Noggle.
Here.
Amir Famili. Ted Lyons.
Here.
Linda Rosenfeld.
Here.
Norma Cusick. Kevin Baker. Jeff Morgan.
Here.
Sean Ziller.
Here.
Mark Ramis.
Here.
All right, we have 6 board members present.
Okay,
So we do
have
have
a
a
quorum. All right. Thank you. The packets for the board were distributed in advance electronically as well as hard copies and have been available on the website. There were a couple additional documents sent out to us later in the day that hopefully everybody received those documents. At this time, we're going to review the agenda for today's meeting and the need for executive sessions.
All right, thank you. I have no additions for the agenda or need for executive session today. However, we would like to remove one item. Apologize for the confusion on this one. The item under wastewater regarding the Sand Springs wastewater treatment plant treatment process modification. We sent that out late, but turns out we have some outstanding questions on it. We'd like to pull it from the agenda. So that's the change for today.
All right, any other changes? Yeah. All right, then let's move on to the approval of minutes from September 11th and then, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to recognize Kevin Baker. Kevin, can you hear us?
He's on.
Yep, all good.
Great.
We now have 7 board members,
Yes, we do.
correct? All right, moving on with the approval of minutes from September 11th. And then following that, September 18th meeting.
Move that the minutes be approved.
Second. All right, motion by Linda, seconded by Sean, and that's for one of them or both of them. We'll do one at a time, Linda.
Okay, that's what I did.
All right, September 11th.
Right.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to the September 18th meeting notes.
Moved as with one minor little change. On the 3rd page, it says on a motion by the Sean Ziller. I don't think the has to be there. The.
I disagree, but okay.
Oh, okay. So,
It's kind of like a title.
Yeah.
right.
All right. Motion made to approve. I need a second.
I'll second.
Second by Sean. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. At this time, we open up the floor for the public to make any comments about any topics that are not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything to say?
No, thank you, Brian.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Jen and Brian. Moving on to action discussion items. We have 3 under finance administration. The first one being the capital plan for 2024 through 2028. It's the white documents. It's digital board pack, pages 12 to 34. Staff is requesting approval.
Great, thank you. So I have a brief presentation to share, and it essentially just covers the material that's in the cover memo as well. Trying to give a summary of the whole planning process and where we've been and what we're asking for. So presentations were posted on our website and shared in advance. And I'll look for support as needed from both Ed and especially Chuck on the projects, those questions. So, whoops. Screen where it needs to be. All right, that'll work. So the planning process, we've gone through this pretty much with every meeting, just as a recap, that what we're doing with the 5-year capital plan is conceptual, it's a plan, it's not an approval of actual dollars. And we get into that actually at the very next item on the agenda, which is the budget process. So for 2024, we have capital budget that reflects the first year of the 5-year capital plan. And then each budget thereafter would include those dollars for that calendar year. We also bring projects to the board for approval through the project approval phase, which you see on a regular basis for individual projects, as well as when we do financing, whether it's grant applications or bond going out for bond money. The projects that are included in those are part of a process that the board gets to see. So all of that to say is there's lots of bites at the apple for the board to comment on projects and to provide feedback. At the capital planning stage, we really are looking at it at a high level, conceptual level. What's shown on the board here is our timeline of our planning process. And you can see we're in October now. We started back in June. We probably started earlier than that, even with some of the beginning works of putting the plan together. So there's a lot of staff work that goes into putting the plan together and preparing it for presentation to the board. We did presentations to the board in August, as well as presentation to the county commissioners on August 23rd. And then there's a 30-day. So, and then I think we have some comments to talk about at the end of the presentation. So what you have in your packet are just some minor updates to the plan that in addition to the 2-letter comments that we got from the public review process, we also have just a few changes to the 2024 project spending. And those are really just refinements to projects as we were going through the budget process at the same time. So we gave you the big fold out project detail sheet so you could see, or the project summary sheets, so you could see the updated numbers year by year. And then to go along with that, because some of the numbers did change in a small way, updated the financial sections of the capital plans as well. And Chuck or Ed, I don't know if you want to share anything about the nature of those changes.
What we refined the cost for the Allentown meter replacement program, the annual cost, there was a slight increase there. There were some other minor last minute changes in the Allentown cost regarding fleet, addition of fleet. So that was part of the $370,000. Also, there was a $50,000 allowance put away for the proposed interconnection with the city of Bethlehem. And there were some other minor adjustments there. For the suburban side, the capacity, wastewater capacity planning and expansion, there was some additional budget costs added there regarding regional Act 537 work. We felt that the cost that we reflected in the draft plan was a little bit too low. There was a minor reduction in the Western Lehigh major repairs and rehab for manholes, just to fine tune that number a little bit. We brought the capital cost down to $25,000. And then their Spring Creek pump station upgrade, we shifted some costs given anticipated equipment lead time issues with new variable frequency drives. We concentrated more of the spending in 2025 versus 2024. Those were really the only cost changes that were made. So like Liesl said, they were all refinements and last minute entries from operations as far as fleet under the annual.
Anything worth noting on the financial justification?
Actually, not a whole lot of fundamental change. I mean, given some of the capital spending changes, when we went back through the financial justifications that were in the book, To be honest with you, there wasn't any real drastic increase in the amount of funding coming out of current rates and reserves versus borrowing. We are going to borrow $21 million almost to accommodate all three funds. With respect to the capital plan and ultimately in the budget as well. So I'm gonna be busy.
So essentially, some minor adjustments on 2024 mostly. And you have all the changes on the summary sheets that were provided in the packet. Just to kind of take a step back a little bit, we spent a lot of time at our meetings talking very detailed, fund by fund, project by project, what's in the plan. I wanted to share this summary of the whole plan sort of put together and what it looks like. And you can see this is suburban, water, wastewater, and city and administrative costs sort of all put together into this summary fashion. And you can see our total plan for the 5-year period is $261 million. It's a significant increase, more than double our prior 5-year plan, which was $124 million. Pardon me. And really wanted to highlight a couple of key things that are driving that change. And they're the items that are marked on this slide as new. So the sewer wet weather projects and also programs related to regulatory changes that are happening. I'm going to touch on them very, very briefly. First, related to regulatory drivers, take them in reverse order. Pardon me, there's really two main items that are included in the capital plans related to regulatory changes that are happening. First being PFAS, or the perfluorinated compound, new regulations related to drinking water. And we expect to see regulations coming as well for wastewater and biosolids. That is not included in the capital plan. What is included in the capital plan related to PFAS are some studies, as well as some preliminary estimate of costs for treatment at the water filtration plant in Allentown. So that's a major cost driver that was not included in prior plans based on new regulation. The next one relates to lead service lines, and we talked quite a bit about this, the opportunity potentially to receive grant funding to do a lead service line removal program. I have some numbers here of where we think we have lead service lines on the public side of the system and the private side. And then we also have another 9,000 or so service lines, but unknown material that have to be addressed through the program. So the way we've handled the lead service line program in the capital plan is to show about $15 million a year in replacement program funding, and assuming about $10 million a year in grants. These are big assumptions that we're making based on current availability of grant funding, and we will adjust those programs as it goes forward to see what really becomes available for the grant programs. And if we have more grant funding available, we can be more aggressive, or vice versa. We also expect to see later this year an updated lead and copper rule from EPA, which may shape the program even further in the years ahead.
Just a quick question. So on the lead service lines, the public-private side, is that the divider, the shutoff valve at the curb? So that's what we consider that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In our system, both in Allentown and suburban, the public side runs from the main to the curb, to that curb stop, and then the private side from the curb into the house owned by the homeowner.
Okay, so some of those are the same line then, basically.
Could be.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
A question, follow up. The 9,000, we probably asked this question before. The 9,000 material lines will be discovered by literally taking a shovel and digging down, taking a look.
Well, it'll be a combination of different things. And actually, I'll just turn to AJ. He's working the inventory program. You can share a little bit about how you're approaching that.
Yeah, so there's a number of ways to do it. We're going to use our own operations field services people to go into people's homes to get to doing like on-site inspection at the meter. That's only going to tell us about what's on the private side.
Yes.
For the For the public side, we're gonna do some potholing, vacuum extraction to go down and dig down. And then the other thing we're doing is we're using basic artificial intelligence modeling to look at there are firms now that have the ability to predict with some pretty high degree of certainty what you're gonna have based on what else is
Goes
happening.
around it, yeah,
So all those, we're gonna use all those different means.
yeah, cool.
The potholing is the most expensive, so we're trying to be strategic or surgical about where we do those, and
So it was lead and copper. What's the issue with the copper, the
So
joints?
the EPA rule is called the lead and copper
Yeah.
rule. And they're lumped together because the way they're treated from a regulatory perspective is similar. It's about the plumbing material versus the actual water containing lead or copper. So the water runs through a copper pipe, it can leach copper into the water. Water runs through a lead pipe, it can leach lead into the water. So they call it the lead and copper rule, but copper is not an issue in terms of the health effects that we're concerned about with the lead.
So it's not the lead, it's not the joint, the copper joint, which sometimes can have lead in it. If it's soldered.
Yeah, how are we dealing with solder?
no, it's a real, yeah, so lead solder joints in the home is not addressed by this regulation. So that's in the home and not addressed here.
Same thing with like brass plumbing fixtures inside the home, these sorts of things. That's really truly private plumbing side stuff.
Thank you.
All right, so then moving on to the sewer side, we talk about the sewer issues, Regional Act 537 plan about once a month these days. Phil hasn't done a detailed presentation in a little while. But I think we're all well aware of the program to address wet weather and capacity issues in the Kleins Island sewer system. Just wanted to highlight a couple of key points and drivers for that relate to the capital plan. So the engineering around the Act 537 is about 90% complete. And really kind of narrowing down the solutions in these three areas related to aging infrastructure, the size of the major conveyance systems and pumping systems, and then the pre-treatment plant. We've spoken about all three of these in the past. Want to say that the major programs and projects that are included in the Act 537 plan are not included in the capital plan. What we're really doing in the capital plan is addressing some key components of work that we're going to be doing right away that we know we're going to do, such as inflow and infiltration and source reduction work in the city system. That's work that the city has authorized and we're already moving forward and we've had some authorizations for. So that program is in the capital plan, as well as some major upgrades to Kleins Island to upgrade the treatment or the pumping capacity for wet weather. But those projects are all kicking off in advance of the 537 plan being done. Once we have the 537 plan completed or further along toward being completed, then we'll see additional projects being rolled into our capital plan once we have agreement within the region about those projects. So again, this is the summary of all the projects that are included in the capital plan, and the two items that I just touched on briefly related to the wet weather sewer projects and the regulatory driven projects. That's really the main driver for the big change in the overall cost between last year's plan and this year's plan. And do you want to touch this one?
Okay, so we're gonna spend $261 million. Current cash flows and current operating revenues are gonna provide 131 million. So you can see that's 50% of what we're gonna spend is coming from what's happening already on the books or coming in the next period. We are gonna borrow $91 million over the 5-year period. I gave you 21 for 2024, so obviously we're gonna borrow another $70 million in the last 4 years of the plan, and that'll amount to about 35%. And we did build $40 million worth of grant money in. We still talked about the money that we thought we were gonna get for lead service line replacements. And we have some other ARPA stuff coming from the city as well, so that'll be about 15%. So got a chunk of borrowing to undertake over the next 5 years.
And just to reiterate, I mentioned this before, but the $30 million in grants related to the lead program, if that materializes, or it seems like an even greater possibility to maximize that, we would adjust the program accordingly to kind of go with the flow in terms of what grant funding is available.
And I think I asked this in the last meeting, but the for the ARPA funding, Allentown Council did vote on the allocation to the LCA.
They
right?
did.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and actually, if you bring it into the rates, excuse me, the in the memo, we're showing $6.2 million from the city of Allentown ARPA allocation, and that was approved by a city ordinance for specific projects, including continued support for main replacement projects, as well as the filter upgrade at the water filtration plant. Now, what it all means in terms of customer impact, we do have some great projections in the plan and in the financial justifications that Ed put together. Pardon me, for suburban water, we're anticipating the need to boost revenue by 3.5% to 5% per year to cover the additional debt service as well as the additional capital spending that's in the plan. Suburban wastewater, it kind of goes up and down a little bit based on the year and the way the intermunicipal agreements go, but averages out to about 3.8% per year. And then the Allentown division rates are really not tied exclusively to capital spending because the lease agreement dictates how those rates will increase over time. So we have, during this time period, CPI or inflation plus 2.5% is the base increase to rates in Allentown. And then selected projects in the plan will have some cost recovery built into it. You know, in accordance with the lease agreement.
Question,
Yes.
the CPI plus 2.5%. The CPI, of course, as we all know, is really gallivanting along here as we speak. I don't even know what it is. Ed, do you have any idea?
For this plan,
Well,
2.2.
That's the plan, but when we actually get the data.
Yeah, again, they were thinking 3.2, maybe to 4.2, depends on which
4.2.
expert you want to talk to.
So you throw a 2.5 on top of that, you're looking at over 6% increases.
yeah.
We're not required to do that, are we? We just can do it.
Well, we have some provisions in the lease agreement related to rate relief. So there's formulas to it. So we view it as needing to achieve the rates that are specified in the lease agreement. And then once we hit some certain financial targets that are included in the lease agreement related to debt service coverage and cash project funding, then there's provisions for how you do rate reductions or change the rate. So it's pretty prescriptive in terms of how that happens in the lease.
Yeah, I can see why I'm pointing it out, because with 3.8% increase in suburban wastewater, and Allentown's at 6.5%.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about rates for 2024 in the budget presentation, but to put it in context, this year's CPIU for the period of July 1, 2022 to June 30, 2023 was only 2.2%.
Yeah.
So we're at 4.7% for that lease rate change for 2024.
Thank you.
Doesn't the 2.5 change at some point in time?
It does. It goes down to 2% in 2033. 2033?
2033 is correct.
You got better memory than I do.
So the public comment period was roughly 30 days, maybe an extra week or so in there. Depending on when it was published and sent out. We have a distribution process for getting it out to the municipalities we serve. Have it posted on our website, available for public comment, and then also present to the county commissioners. Chuck attended the LVPC meeting, a couple of them,
Yes.
to present as
The
well.
environmental committee meeting and then the regular meeting.
For the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I also had the opportunity to present kind of at a last minute thing a couple weeks ago to the Lehigh County Council of Governments. So that was a nice opportunity to meet some municipal managers and share some of this information as well. We did receive a letter from the city of Allentown as well as the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. They're attached to the materials that were sent. And reviewing them, the city letter was received kind of at the end of the comment period. So there's a lot of detail in their letter. We haven't responded to it yet, but we will do so. And Chuck, you're working on that response letter. I don't believe there's anything in either comment letter that is that would be substantive in terms of changing the scope of the plan, unless you saw something.
No, it's nothing will change.
Okay.
It was good to be reminded of the capital recovery charge being up to $1.2 million for adjustments.
Right.
Did you want to open up the opportunity for cities and comment on anything?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right where we are.
Oh.
That's the end of the presentation. So it's really just about the conversation and any comments.
Jenny or Brian, did you want to comment at all on the comments made by the city?
No, sir, I think Liesl, when she said it wasn't really substantive, it was, some of it was just, cleaning up some of the detail, talking about how much was contributed from ARPA, for example. That was primarily our comments. Very well done report. We appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciated your comments. Okay, further questions, board members? There none. We are seeking approval at this point in time, so we need a motion, second. Motion. All right, motion made by Sean and seconded by Jeff for approval of the 2024 to 2028 capital plan. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. Good work. A lot of work, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right. Good challenge. All right, moving on then to the next topic under finance administration is the 2024 budget. The discussion topic, white documents within our board package, digital board package, pages 35 to 91.
I have a frog in my throat, so get something here. Presentation up. We have a rather lengthy presentation this time to review the 2024 budget, and we also have 2024 proposed rates to share with you. So that's why it's a little bit longer this time around. We can get that.
And after this meeting, we'll be approving this by when?
The approval, we're gonna ask for in 2 weeks. And then the rates we'll ask for approval in November. So we give you the rates now so that you can see kind of how we get to the revenue that's in the budget. But we want to do some public notice and other notifications prior to asking for approval on the rates.
Okay. Thank you.
So Ed and I will tag team on this one. And so today we are going to cover two main things. Number one being any changes to the fund financials from the prior presentation. We did do two prior presentations with preliminary numbers. We now have preliminary final numbers, or I don't know what we call it. Preliminary final, does that count?
I'd like to say they're pretty final.
And then again, the proposed rates for all divisions, we'll cover those. And then good tee up, Brian, we'll do the budget approval, ask for the budget approval at the next meeting. It is due by November 1st. So if there are changes that we can't accommodate by the 23rd, we still have an extra week to get another meeting in and make some final changes. And then we'll look for rate adoption in November. Right? Ed.
Wow, okay. So this is a summary of where we are by fund. We'll start with suburban water, which would be in the leftmost. You could see the net revenue with almost $19 million of operating revenues. Operating expenses of 12, leaving us with $6.7 million. What I like about it is we estimated debt service, including the current and what we project in the borrowed amount, will be 3.4. So at the end of the day, we'll have 1.96 debt service coverage ratio, which is certainly well above the 1.20 threshold that we set. In terms of capital, we are going to spend about $7.1 million. 1.8 of that will come from current revenues and reserves. We have $5.2 million slated to be borrowed. That is actually the last of the amount that we financed in 2022 coming into play, the 5.2 million left. So at the end of the year, we'll have about $320,000 worth of project reserve left on the books. In terms of cash flow, you're talking about $9.7 million of beginning balance coming into this year. That based upon our forecast, the surplus for 2024 in the budget is 3.3. We're going to give the $1.9 million over to capital for capital spending. So we'll be left with $11.1 million on the books, and that will be worth 337 days cash on hand compared to operating expenses. So it would be operating days cash. Again, 320,000 reserve. We have other reserves and investments of 4.8. So the fund will carry $16.2 million of cash and invested balances. Coming into the year, we're almost 15. So actually the net change would be almost $1.4 million of positive change. On the wastewater side, $20.8 million worth of revenues, 15.2 of expenses. So you're going to get left with 5.6 for debt service. Debt service would be 1.2, so we'll be at 4.67. I guess noteworthy is we had been running in the neighborhood of 7, 8, and sometimes 10 with borrowing going up. You can see the effect on that number. We're still better than the 1.20 that we threshold, but this is going to carry a little bit more debt on the books now. So we're going to spend $11.5 million. About 4.3 will come from rates and reserves, and then we will borrow $7.2 million and have left about 455,000 plus in project reserves. In terms of cash flow, we'll start out the year with 9.1 at about 4.7 is we budgeted 2024. Capital will take away another 4.3. So we'll end up with $9.5 million of cash sitting on the books in wastewater, 227 days. And other reserves of about 6.9. This fund will also carry almost $17 million worth of cash and investment balance. Coming into the year, we're 17, so actually this fund will show a little bit of decrement or decrease in terms of a year to year.
And can I
Cindy.
ask you a question?
Sure.
In the middle there, the capital budget overview, how do you pick what is gonna be the borrowed amount and what's gonna be used from existing?
How do I, so against the 11 point, yeah.
Those two numbers, so like the first one is a little different than in the second one, you used almost all of what was available.
Right, well, the first one is being forced by the fact that we have to use up the money that we set out in 2022, so we're actually taking more of a borrowed balance.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
which is to clear that,
Okay.
but to generally answer your question, what I try to look at is, can I take as much out of operations and still hold 180 days?
Okay. Thank you, yep,
And that's kind of how I look at it.
okay.
So in terms of the city division, we're almost at $69 million in operating revenues, operating expenses, almost 26. So that'll give us $43.4 million of money available for debt service. With some borrowing and current debt service, we'll be at 16.3. So we'll be about 2.67 in debt service coverage ratio. Again, a good number. Good.
How much of the 16 million is due to the lease?
All but $9 million. And I gotta be careful, $9 million worth of borrowing, so you're probably talking about, maybe just, maybe $100,000 worth of debt service related to new borrowing. So the rest of it is coming from the lease itself.
Thank you.
So 2.67, good. Capital spending of 32.6. 24 million will come from operations and reserves. We'll need to borrow 8.6. So that'll leave us with 300,000 left. In terms of cash flow, we'll start the year off with 15. We'll add another 27, take away 24 for capital. And we'll have almost $18 million of cash on hand. That's worth 271 days. So across the board, 337, 227, 271, all looking good with respect to our required 180 days. Some money in project reserves, and at the end, the total fund balance of almost $80 million will be up by $2.9 million as compared to the beginning of the year. This is the summary you're used to looking at, which I made the comment when we did the last one that I started off with, well, all three funds were positive for net income and all three funds were positive for cash flow. So I can't make that statement now because obviously with some of the changes in suburban wastewater, we ended up with a negative net income. We're still positive in water and still healthy in the city division. So altogether, $15.2 million of income. In terms of cash flows, I can't say that all three funds are going on the positive side. And that's worth 4.7. We talked about the debt service coverage ratios, and you can see the spending again, total spending at $51.2 million. This reserve analysis was a calculation that I worked up to do a combination of, do we have enough cash to cover operations at 180 days? And because we have a pretty hefty capital expenditure, it's also a way to look at how much do we have in reserves that could cover what I would call replacement of capital. And if you we're just going down the line a little bit. Cash, if you look at the days, suburban wastewater or water, we're 337, 227, 271, and 273. When you start to include invested balances, because they're near cash, They go up 396, 385, 271, and 334. So in terms of the balances themselves, that's you're looking at $14.4 million on the water side, 16.5 on wastewater, and city you're at 18.3. So altogether $49.2 million of cash and investments. So when you start to consider that we need 180 days, that's that 50% up there. So we're covering our operating reserves by $8.3 million, 8.9, 6.2, and a total of 23.5. That's good. And then if you look at, if I said that we were going to cover X depreciation, you can see the depreciation expense there. Across the board, 357, 6.2 says that we basically need $2.7 million in the next to last line there, $2.7 million, and we have an excess of 5.7. So this is really just a way for me to say, when you add up cash, when you add up all our invested balances, you consider what you want to hold in reserve for operating expenses, and you want to make sure that you're covering some normal replacement. We're doing okay. So this, we'll get into the changes now between what we saw the last time and where we are now. Suburban water, not really a big change. We dropped revenue a little bit by 112,000 plus. We lowered the expenses related to the water purchases cost, which was related to payment to the city on the filter job. So altogether, we pushed cash up by $541,000. So you can see that the days are still good. Days cash on hand are still good. They got better. The balance got better by 541,000. And at the end, we're showing a cash flow of $1.4 million versus 900 some thousand dollars. And so this one got better, and that's good. Without beating all the cash flows to death, I mean, you can see the $5.2 million coming in to cover the $7 million. The metrics look good, 1.20, 1.96, 0.46 in capital coverage, which was higher than I thought it was. And days cash on hand of 346. So I think the suburban water budget for the year looks fine. I mean, as we talked about last time, and it getting a little bit better, I think it looks fine. And the metrics look good.
Right. I'll take over on rates.
I know I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but in terms of your determination of the cash on hand and the days available for that, do you feel, given all of what we know now and headed in the future, you know, do you feel like the cash on hand for each fund, you know, is that a bit of a sweet spot in your mind of having that amount of cash on hand? And the reason I ask that is you want to make sure you have the 180-day threshold plus 50% of reserves. Was there a consideration of, okay, maybe we can lessen the number of days in which we have cash on hand, you know, to really, lessen some impacts elsewhere? Or do you feel like, as I said,
I think the 180 days is somewhat of a sweet spot for me. Over my professional life, in most of the businesses that I've been associated with, we try to at least avoid the issue of if something drastic happened that we wouldn't be able to cover half of our operating expenses. So for suburban water and suburban wastewater, I would say the 180 days is a good target for us. Where I might be persuaded a little bit lower, might be on the city side, and for one reason, we carry an enormous amount of debt service reserves required by the lease, and that includes some O and M reserve as well. So almost like I could say, well, if we were a little bit less than 180 days, I know I've got it sitting in there anyway.
Right, but are we even beyond that in terms of, I think I don't know if we're on the page here, if we go back maybe one, you know, we're maybe back, we're at the 270.
The operating days,
Yes,
days cash on hand, 337, 227.
271, yeah. I mean, was there, do you feel like those numbers are, you know, are those operating days cash on hand, that's appropriate in terms of?
Yeah, I like that they're above the 180 and they reflect that we're still borrowing some money to do some of the capital project. So they might be, you might be able to persuade them down a little bit by throwing a little bit more money at capital, but I like where they are based on the unknowns with some of the capital spending. There's quite a bit of I'll call it uncertainty, unknown, and risk out there with the capital spending levels the way they are. So
180 plus, that's a good safety buffer.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, you're doing rates. You're doing rates.
All right, so the 2024 rates for suburban water. Worked on those a little bit and just want to remind the board that we did a full scale water rate study this time last year. Dave Bush was here and presented the rate study for 2023 through 2027 in October of last year. So we took kind of a light version this time around using the results of what he provided to us last time. So some key results and recommendations from that study were from Dave that the fixed charges through that study period were really right where they needed to be to cover the cost categories that get paid through the fixed charge. Same thing with the private fire service charges. Those are like a fixed charge based on the size of the incoming fire line, that those are right where they need to be to cover the cost components that go into that rate. Where the recommended changes are relate to the public fire hydrant fees that get charged to the municipalities. And there's a 4% rate adder in that category throughout the study period. And then if there's revenue requirement beyond what these rates provide, that would go into the volume charge. So typical customer, residential customer has a fixed charge that's based on the size of their meter, and then a volume charge based on how much water they use. The fixed charge component would stay at the current level, and in achieving that 4% revenue requirement that Ed was talking about in prior presentations, 5% revenue requirement, we're going to make that up through the volume charge. Okay, so just what that looks like to advance. These are the components of the rate schedule that are not changing. So the fixed charge, as well as the fire line charges for private fire service, you can see what they look like here. So a typical residential customer has a 5/8 by 3/4 inch water meter, and their fixed charge is $31.30 per quarter. And then the fire line, private fire line, is based on the size of the incoming fire line. No changes there. The volume charge, we have in our suburban division, we have what's called a declining rate block. And that is primarily due to the heavy industrial user base that we have. Boston Beer, some of the water companies, Ocean Spray, et cetera, that use very high volumes. And there's a little bit of an economy of scale that the rate study kind of captures through how the costs are allocated through these rate blocks. So we've been working kind of over time to somewhat bring those a little closer together, but through the work of Keystone, who did the rate study, they presented a rate increase over the next 4 years that kind of makes some adjustments to the spread of those rates. So for this year, we're recommending a 6% increase in the first 3 rate blocks and roughly 5% in the bottom 2 rate blocks, and that achieves the spread essentially that was provided through the rate study for cost allocation through the rates. And then you can see the public fire protection, a 4% increase in those charges. So those are the 4 main components of our rate schedule for suburban water. What does it all mean? For the average residential customer, we're using 15,000 gallons per quarter. Some customers use less, some customers use more. But you can see, oh, I forgot to put column headings here. This one is 2023, the current rate. And then the one on the right is the proposed rate. So the fixed charge, you can see, does not change. And then at with the volume charge changing, you can see the increase there. So for a typical residential customer, you see the quarterly bill going from $85 to $88.30. That's almost 4%. For our industrial customers who have much larger portion of their water bill showing up in the volume charge. Fixed charge is a pretty small percentage of their bill. The volume charge is a bigger portion. Their increase will be a little higher, up to about 6%. So somewhere in between those two is where the average rate change will be. Any questions on that?
Okay, we did have some changes, actually some significant changes in suburban wastewater. We had an increase in operating expenses related to higher treatment and transportation volumes as a result of plugging in some of the variables into our signatory model. We had a reduction of $1.9 million related to signatory model / revenues coming from third party in the pre-treatment area. So the net revenue went down by $2.5 million. And I'm sort of glad we looked at this again, because this would have wrapped up on us like it did this year in terms of revenues. So I think we got the revenues correct now, whereas we were a little bit overstated when we went through this the last time. Capital spending went up by $125,000, ultimately as a result of the changes in operating revenue and the changes in the expenses. Essentially, I'm gonna end up borrowing 7,175 instead of 6,350 like we originally laid out, so that'll also have an effect on debt service. So as you look at the cash flow in this fund, it's showing a negative number when you look at fund change from year to year of 152,956 on the negative side. And if you want to go to the cash flow, we've kind of fixed that for a reason. We're going to take $500,000 of invested balance and let it mature and not reinvest it, so that we can actually get a positive cash flow of $347,000 on suburban wastewater. So the metrics, operating ratio with DNA is less than 1. That's not the healthiest. And debt service coverage ratio is okay, 4.67, capital coverage 0.36 days cash on hand will be 238, but altogether, we struggled to get over the negative number bit in the suburban wastewater as a result of the changes.
So the suburban wastewater financial makeup is just so different from suburban water for the key reason being the signatory agreements that we have. So the way that we calculate revenue in our suburban wastewater division is 100% based on how the agreements are written and the process for recovering actual costs. So seeing operating ratio at roughly 1 or a little less than 1 is by design, where the intermunicipal agreements are established to cover only the actual costs and really not give us a lot of cushion more. So that's one of the things that we'll be working on with the signatories in terms of the Act 537 plan and looking at the intermunicipal agreements and how to make this whole regional process work a little more smoothly. After this presentation, we also have Jen Montero here to share the 2024 user charge report that was prepared for the signatories. So the way that she calculates the rates are presented to the signatories, and then the revenue included in the budget. So we'll go through that. We'll have Jen go through that in a little more detail after this presentation. The only thing I wanted to mention more specifically is this first item where our current budget proposal, this should say 2024, oh boy. The 2024 rates show no change in the rate charge to our direct customers in Upper Milford or Heidelberg or Wingwood, those small systems that we have. We have not updated those rates in over a decade. And so in 2024, we do need to take a look at that and review, because that is part of the challenge that we have with this this fund as well, because there's a lot of capital.
Yeah, time has come to take a look at that.
Yeah. Apologize for, that's mistake number 2 in this presentation. Okay.
Okay, and the city side, memory serves me well. When we talked the last time, I thought that when we presented the budget to you, that we were a little bit short of where I thought we should be on the city, and that has played out. We were a little bit short on the residential industrial side. So we adjusted revenue appropriately by 1.3 million upward. There's operating expenses decreased by $1,000. So most of the change there is a result of the revenue. We did budget more, $20,000 more in capital. So essentially, at the end of the day, we are going up to $2.9 million in cash flows versus 1.7 that we had originally presented to you, and you can see that changes $1.3 million there. Again, so I'm just going to cover some of the metrics. Operating ratio 1.97, debt service coverage ratio 2.67, capital coverage 0.83 in unrestricted days, cash on hand 276 rounded. So the metrics look good in the city division. Cash flow went up.
2024 rates for the city division. To just be clear, the water and sewer rates are developed based on the formulas. We mentioned this before, the earned use agreement. I'm going to go through them kind of step by step. There's a lot of components to the city rates, so I just want to make sure we're clear on those. For the municipal signatory water and sewer rates, those are also calculated by agreement, by formulas, and those were shared with the municipalities end of September. So the rates The rates for Allentown are really kind of in two different categories. The first category are what I call the lease rates, or the rates that are outlined in a specific schedule in the lease agreement called Schedule 3. Those lease rates are those that increase by that CPIU plus 2.5% that we talked about earlier. So that there's a fixed charge component for water and sewer and a volume or flow charge for water and sewer. However, this year includes the last step of the 4-step process to increase those fixed charges that we negotiated with the city of Allentown in 2020. So CPIU was 2.2%. So 2.2 plus the 2.5 index, it's a 4.7% increase. But then there's this additional jump in the fixed charges to do that final step of the transition to the full fixed charge that's included in the lease rates. So I'm going to put all this together at the end so you can see what it looks like. But what's shown on the slide now are the 2024 lease rates per Schedule 3 with those increases included. So a residential customer that's got a 5/8 inch meter would have a water fixed charge of $80.50 per quarter, and a fixed charge for sewer of $27.98. So that's the fixed charge component. The volume charge also goes up by the 4.7. There's no additional jump this year. It's just the lease increase of the 4.7%. So you see the volume and flow charge for water and sewer, $4.88 roughly for water and $3.44 roughly for sewer. There's just a couple of small rate adders that are included in these numbers, including some recovery for Delaware River Basin charges, and anything that relates to change of law that's approved by the city goes into this combined rate as well. So that's part one, the lease rates that are in Schedule 3. Part 2 are these other rates. So the additional rates that can be charged for capital cost recovery, and also the city's administrative order charges. So what's shown on this slide are all the projects minus the administrative order, all the projects that were completed under that capital cost recovery charge heading since the beginning of the lease, including several cycles of water main replacements, several good projects at the wastewater plant, the high lift pumps, for example, and then a few projects at the end that are in progress but are already being incorporated into the rate. So the substation project at wastewater, or the ionized source reduction program. I listed a couple here with zeros as the project costs, just to indicate that these are projects that would have gone into the rates but are not, because of the city granting some ARPA fund allocation to us. So I think that's an important component in how the city is trying to keep rates low where we can, lower where we can.
So just a quick question.
Yes.
Why is the cost recovery time different?
The cost recovery period is based on the shorter of 30 years or the engineering estimate of useful life. So the belt filter press, for example, would have a 20-year life on it.
Okay.
Hope those water mains last more than 30 years. So the $45 million of projects that have been completed all kind of get boiled down into this capital cost recovery charge that's applied to the customer bill. A whole lot of math and spreadsheets. This is what it boils down to. The water capital cost recovery charge is about 39 cents per 1,000 gallons. The sewer capital cost recovery charge, 33 cents per 1,000 gallons. And then the city's administrative order charge is a little over 20 cents per 1,000 gallons. The administrative order charge is something that we're applying to the customer bill and then collecting it and returning it to the city to reimburse the city for their contribution toward addressing sewer issues in Allentown. They have a couple outstanding bonds. We're collecting the debt service for them, and then some other cash contributions we're collecting. So a lot of great components here. What it looks like for a customer bill. Typical customer bill has 7 lines on it. For water, their fixed charge, their volume charge, their capital cost recovery charge. For sewer, it's their fixed charge, their flow charge, capital cost recovery charge, and the city's administrative order fee. With all the different changes included in the 2024 rates, you can see a typical residential bill for a customer that uses 15,000 gallons per quarter, going from $219 up to $245. And that altogether comes to about 11.6%. Big component of that 11.6% is in that last step of the fixed charge. So moving forward, those fixed charges would only increase by the CPI plus 2.5% moving forward.
So we talked about capital budget. Again, if you look at each system, you got the amount that is related to the specific projects they have. And admin is worth $1.8 million, and that is getting split pretty much well by division, 50-50 by division, and suburban water and wastewater split that further. So altogether, you're talking $51.2 million for total spending for 2024, and that's a big number for us. This is the admin. You can see the big hitters in admin are the SCADA programming. The next bigger hitter would be us getting down to the bottom. We have $800,000 built into the budget for Munis implementation. We're targeting another $550,000 worth of office expansion costs. That's the 2 big hitters for the admin plan.
I just want to say before you flip to the next screen, since you have the packet for the capital plan, you should be able to tie exactly the column that says 2024 in the capital plan to what's shown here. So you have those details in the plan.
Yeah, I'm just kind of hitting on the big numbers. In terms of suburban water, $2.4 million worth of annual projects. And next big hitter would be main replacement of 2.9 and water meter replacement program of $800,000 to get to the $6.6 million. Wastewater, almost $1 million worth of annual projects. We are targeting $1 million worth of pre-treatment plant improvements in the Western Lehigh interceptor systems. You're talking about I&I investigation of $1 million, pump station and force main $3.5 million. And as you get into well, you can see a number of satellite systems, but the big one there would be Lynn Township of $500,000. So almost $11.1 million in the wastewater side. And on the city side, $2.7 million worth of annual projects. The next big hitter would be a large project in CCRC projects, where the main replacement of 4.8, filter upgrades of $2.4 million, and then there's a lead service line replacement of $5 million. So in the city, total of $16.9 million, and that's just in the water side. On the wastewater side, we got $2.7 million worth of annual projects. Got $2 million headed for manhole inspection and sealing. $2.2 million in electrical substation replacement. 1.4 HVAC upgrades and $3 million in source reduction I&I elimination. Total of 14.8 million dollars on the wastewater side of the city. Okay, here's the trends for each of the funds. This is basically 5 years. You can see the operating revenues have climbed based on all our increases over the years. Operating income kind of gone up and then come back down. In operating side, net income, well, that was down in 2020, built it back up, and it's been a steady decrease. And that would be as a result of some of the capital improvements coming through as depreciation, some of the changes in operating expenses as well. Net cash available for capital is peaked in 2022, a little bit in 2023, and down to 3.3 million in 24. That service coverage ratio, we peaked again at 3.93, and that's been down, but in any case, we were above 1.20, which is good. And you can see the change in capital spending. One time when we were looking at suburban water, we're pretty much slated to get $5 million out of current revenues, and well, that has changed now. You can see that in 2022, that requirement was 8, and almost 7, and 7 again in 2024 on water. So wastewater, not the in terms of operating revenues, kind of 16 to 19 million hovering. Liesel's mentioned the impact that the signatory situation has on what we do in operating revenues. On operating income, well, it's been negative, and at this point in time, it went from minus 844 and going to minus 3 million. I'm sorry, 3 million. So that's been on the negative side, as we talked about when we went through that fund. Net income, we had one positive back in 2020, and it's been minus 2.1, back up to minus 1.6 in 2024. Cash available for capital, we're budgeting $4.2 million. You can see the trend is we were up as high as 7.4 5 years ago, and 7 million in 2022. So that's been climbing down, actually falling down a little bit, based on the capital needs. Debt service coverage ratio, target of 1.2. Well, I mean, we've done well in this for all the years. It's coming down because we're borrowing. And capital spending, highest was $8.4 million, going up to 11.5, and the next couple of years in between, probably average about 4.5. So city division operating revenues reflects the CPI plus increase allowed by the lease. Operating income has kind of risen the same way. Net income, one point in time, we were negative $4 million, and now net income is up to almost $15 million. Net available for capital is the same way. Back in 5 years ago, we $6 million had, and now we're up to $27 million, and that's been a steady climb over the years. Debt service coverage ratio has gone up almost in the same fashion, from 1.45 to 2.7. And wow, that number jumps out. $4.1 million in 2020. We're now up to almost $33 million in total capital spending. So I just wanted to kind of, a lot of numbers, we saw a lot of numbers, and there's been some changes since the last time. I guess I just want to say, in terms of comfortability, I think we have revenue numbers now that I'm comfortable with. They're not overstated. We won't have the wastewater problem that we had. I think we did a good job of vetting all that through. We got it tied out to the increase that we wanted of 4.0% in water. I think on the expense side, we're not budgeting something that we can attain as well. I think I'm comfortable with those numbers. We should be able to either be at or be a little bit below 1. So I'm comfortable with that. I haven't seen any metrics that really bother me. The only thing that I can say is a little bit upsetting that we got to take $500,000 out of investments to make sure that we get a little bit positive cash flow in suburban wastewater. But at the end, I'm kind of comfortable with what I'm looking at. So I don't see anything that would make me stay awake at night. Right?
So for what we have left in the budget process, we are going to hear from Jen very, very soon on the wastewater user charge report for suburban. At the next meeting, we'll have a shorter presentation unless we get a lot of feedback that we need to see any changes in the budget. We'll do a brief review of the budget and ask for people at the meeting on the 23rd, and then look at rates again in November. The budget. Any questions, discussion?
Work.
Would we be concerned about any of the trends that we're seeing in the? I mean, they're going down instead of going up.
Well, obviously, with the amount of money that we're spending in wastewater, and some of the unknowns out there, I mean, that's one thing to be a little bit concerned about. I was not bothered by the rate increase in suburban water. We kind of expected that 4%. We're spending a little bit more on capital than at one time when we looked out ahead than we were. Okay, and we're also operating expenses are up a little bit, so you get some factors going there, but I don't see anything. Again, I don't see anything that suggests that we can manage what we're doing. So I think wastewater is a big unknown. And that's all I'll say. Wastewater is a big unknown. The agreements at some point in time aren't going to help us with all the unknowns. But I think we look at the numbers, we do the forecasting like we do, and I think we stay ahead of surprises fairly well. So,
Okay. Any other questions? Board members?
Hey, Brian, this is Kevin. Just a quick couple of questions, quite separate, I guess. One is, how do we feel about our ability to actually spend all the capital money in the plan in terms of resources?
That's a great question. We've been asking ourselves as well. And I think that the 2024 plan, we feel comfortable that we have staff in place to manage. I think we're probably more concerned about a little bit longer term as 537 begins to like really take shape, and we know what those projects are going to look like and the flow of that going forward. We're absolutely going to need to evaluate staffing, and we are working on a staffing analysis actually as we speak on some of that stuff. So we'll have some recommendations in 2024 related to future staffing for project delivery.
Yeah, I was wondering whether 23 performance gives us any indicators on that, but it sounds like you're on top of it. It's just a huge amount of work. The second comment was with regard to the rate increases. You know, I think in the past we've looked at some data that suggested that the services are still a great value when you look at it like sort of in national or regional context. Probably as we go forward, if we think those kinds of rate increases are coming, we probably want to update that, take a look at where we are competitively.
Yes, and so for the November meeting, when we look at rates again, I'll have the Lehigh Valley at least rate comparison. If we want to look a little more broadly, we can do that as well. I do see that our rates are definitely moving more toward the center of the continuum versus being the very lowest in the Lehigh Valley, especially in the city division with the higher fixed charge. That's where I get more concerned about the affordability and the challenges within the city of Allen County for those kinds of rates. But we'll definitely present that in November.
Thanks, Lisa.
Mark, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. At least, past life budgeting, when I was looking at doing an increase, studying what the impact of a tax increase, say, might be in government, we had a spreadsheet which would enable us to look at things maybe 5 years out at a variety of levels and a variety of things, like what's the impact if I don't do anything 3 years out, if I don't increase a tax or a rate this year? What's the increase if I hold off for a year? What's it going to look like next year or the year after? Of course, a lot of things come into play, the impact of revenue and what our bond rating would have been and the impact on the ability to borrow money. But we're focusing a lot on, at least what I see the capital plan and I see the revenue source for 2024 based on the rate increases, but I don't see the impact of 2025 if I don't do the rate increase, or 2026 if I only do. You know what see where I'm driving at. Do you have a spreadsheet or something that you can plug these? It's a lot more difficult because you're looking at a lot of different areas. But looking 3 years out, as most municipalities probably do, which is realistic, do you look at anything or have anything that we could see that shows what the impact of not doing anything is versus the impact of maybe doing a smaller increase or the 4%, how you got at that and what it's going to save us like 2 years down the road or save the ratepayers?
Yeah. So we have done some of that analysis in the past, Mark, when we've looked at much more significant increases than what we're doing this time. For example, the 1 year we did, I believe it was close to a 15% increase in our suburban water division. And we looked at, do we front load that and do that in the current year versus spreading it out over future years, and what's the impact on borrowing, those kinds of things. We have done that analysis for this year, where the rate increase is right in line with the water rate study that was done last year, and it's right in line with the capital plan that was just presented. It's kind of in line with all the analytics that we've done. So we haven't done a deeper dive on it. We could, if you'd like to see some alternatives. I think just generally speaking, the way that we look at rates is based on how much revenue we need to generate to hit those metrics that Ed's always talking about. So debt service coverage, days cash on hand, and to the extent we can reduce our reliance on borrowing for capital. So it's a balancing act of those key things.
Lisa, one other question. I should probably know this. What's the current bond rating?
And
AA.
for
Yeah.
for suburban.
AA for suburban, and a positive for city.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Positive, so that's AA positive in both suburban and a positive city. And that was because of the total value of debt on the books.
Okay, any other
Thank you.
questions?
That's all I have.
All right, done with that presentation. Okay, see more next time. Okay, well, see less next time.
Yeah.
The final result.
I would just say that if there are any board questions, comments on the budget, to try to get them to me, over the next week or so. As we're preparing our final presentation, we'd like for it to be final if it can be.
I have a question, Ed. Some of the metrics you use is terms of the days of cash and so forth and so on. Are these the industry standards? Do you ever profile yourself against best practices of
Yeah, but I think I did mention, or most of the companies I've been with value cash. I mean, cash is king. And to the extent that you could do all the planning you want, sometimes you just don't know. There's some uncertainty in terms of operating expenses. So pretty much we tried to operate with at least 180 days cash on hand. I mean, for us, you throw in another really huge metric when you get into the amount of debt that we have to put on the books, city, suburban water, wastewater, and that's going to change over a period of time. So a big number then becomes, what's your debt service coverage ratio? And so if you wanted to look at two big hitters, it was how much cash do you have left for surprises if they occur, and what is your debt service coverage ratio? And if I wanted to talk to an S&P guy, they would be the two they would immediately ask for.
So we're in line with what I would call industry standards in terms of, which I assume as well.
I mean, S&P is typically looking for debt service coverage of 2 or better. Our standard with the bond indentures is 1.2. That's the base threshold, but the bond rating agencies are looking for.
Is our debt quote unquote out of line in terms of, are there industry standards for this, or are we, is it all snowflakes that we all kind of looks the same, but we're all a little bit different?
So without benchmarking us against, and I haven't done that, I would say in suburban water and wastewater, especially wastewater, we weren't out of line. In fact, there was a lot of people when we looked at wastewater said that's all the amount of debt that you have on the books. You're not hiding anything. On the city side, a little bit different because of what we had to do to get the system. So that kind of plays into it. And if you strip that out of the equation, I mean, we had not borrowed for projects in the city side since the inception. So I would say not out of whack. If it was, we struggled to meet some of the debt service coverage requirements.
Thank you.
I would just add to that from the practical side. I mean, the water and wastewater business, you definitely need to have more contingency planning than you do if you're a Fortune 500 company or something, because you just don't know. Every couple months we come in and there's an emergency declaration that we're for a water main break or a sewer break, or you have some large piece of equipment, you have a sinkhole. I mean, there's so many things that you need to have the backup funds available for that. If we're even over the industry standard for cash on hand or contingency funds, I think we're better off.
The other thing too with on the suburban side in particular is the reliance on a small number of big customers. And so, so having some cushion for the potential loss of the major customers is really important.
Thank you. You're answering my question. I just larger question really from a governance point of view. Are we operating at an efficient level? Are we overstating, if you will, or if there is a crisis, rather than funding it, can we borrow? I'm just flipping around here, trying to look at it. Are we maximizing our efficiency in terms of managing our finances? And what I hear is yes.
Yeah, I believe we are. And like I said, the metrics are important. And if you talk to S&P people, they would say, well, quite frankly, we like looking at your numbers better because, well, you guys know things can go wrong and you're covered for it.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we can move on. Next topic. Under Finance and Administration, we have Western Lehigh Interceptor User Charge Report. Seeking approval to 10 documents in our board package, digital board packet pages 92 to 126. I did note in the 10 documents that are seeking preliminary approval, and you'll explain that versus approval.
Well, the rates cannot be finalized until the budget is finalized.
Okay.
So all the numbers that go into the cost basis for all these rates, and the rates we're talking about aren't residential rates. They're paid by the municipalities that use the Western Lehigh Interceptor system, and also the Little Lehigh Relief Interceptor Phase 1 and 2. So, you know, the costs are what they are, and you've heard, you know, all the budget talk, the increases and the decreases, lots of increases in capital. That's all captured there. So yes, preliminary approval is what I'm asking for, and in case something does change, then these will change.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't mean to throw you off in your.
No, that's okay.
presentation.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Right, so there really isn't much to say because we've spent so much time talking about the budget. This report is prepared every year. It's a contractual requirement that dates back to 1985. We send this out to the municipalities every year budget time. And then we also send them an additional packet of papers that tells them what these rates mean for their total costs. I think there's just been a lot of personnel changes with the municipalities over the years. So when this was developed in 1985, there just aren't the same people in place. And so the most useful thing for them is, please just tell me how much I'm gonna owe you this year for treatment and transportation.
Nice.
So, it's a lot of words and numbers just to describe how the rates are derived. Pretty much it is what it is.
Captain Concrete formulas for that.
Yeah, yeah. Formulas, contractual peculiarities, maybe. But you know, it is what it is. It was sent out to the signatories the end of September. I have heard no comment, and I think I've heard no comment because we meet with them on a monthly basis, and we're discussing 537 and the capital plan and giving them an update every month of where we are with the budgeted spending on the capital and what's coming up for the next year. So I think they understand all the increases that they're seeing on the Western Lehigh end. And of course, those Western Lehigh rates also incorporate the city costs that LCA passes on to them. So they're pretty well aware of all the issues. I have heard no comment from this particular signatory group. So that's pretty much all I have.
For those of you who don't know her, this is Jennifer Montero. She's our contracts administrator.
Yes, sorry.
We have a
I
couple.
come once a year. It's on like Christmas.
But Jen does a really good job of staying on top of the process for allocating the cost through and then explaining it as best that she can. It's a very complex process, but all of the municipal managers rely on her very heavily to understand and try to translate that into what they should expect to pay for services in the coming year.
Now, when you say it goes back to 1985, that wasn't all encompassing of all the different municipalities, all the signatories. So as signatories were coming in, they got their own special package, their own special contract, and that's what makes it so difficult to pull this together.
Everybody has their own deal on it.
Yes, yeah, basically that's it, right?
Yeah, well, and this package is specific to our Western Lehigh
Yes.
communities. There's a whole other group of signatories that are signatory to the city. that Jen also administers, but they don't have this requirement that they receive this report. It's just incorporated into the process that, and Jen has shared all those signatories as well.
Right, everybody knows what's coming.
Okay. Any comments, questions from the board?
Well, I think it's nice that it's accepted with not a lot of questions, and as you say, you're meeting every month, so everyone's pretty much up to speed. But it's nice. Good job.
Yeah, makes my job easy. I mean, it's basically, you know, it's a formula. I mean, there's changes every year, you know, like we've had the increase in capital. So, you know, you always have to kind of talk through with Liesl and Ed, how are we gonna handle that? Are we gonna put it in the rates as pay go? Are we gonna use debt service? So, you know, every year has its unique challenges, but I think we've overcome them for 2024 so far.
So if we may take a motion for approval of this, it's subject to any changes that come about as a result of these capital.
But I thought this was a preliminary. That would.
We're going to approve this subject to the changes. She's asking, there's a difference between it in on our agenda, it says approval. You know, and documents that requested preliminary approval. So how would you like us to handle that?
I think what we typically do is we ask for preliminary approval of the rates, and then when you approve the budget, it's assumed to be the final approval of those rates. So
Will the rates change though between now and?
Nothing else is capital.
So the rates will not change unless we change the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we make a change between
Yeah.
what's presented today and what we finally approve, then we'll
Right.
go back and adjust.
I'd come back with another report.
it's
You get to see me
essentially,
twice a year.
it's essentially to signal to the signatories that these are the rates, and that you've looked at them and you've given preliminary.
All right, so the word we're gonna use is preliminary approval.
I move that we preliminary approve the rates.
Second,
All right. Ted made the motion to approve the rates as presented in the 10 documents, and it was seconded by Linda. Are there any questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
aye.
Any against? All right, ayes have it. Thank you very much, Jen. See you next year. Maybe. All right, moving on then to the next item on the agenda, we have on the water, we have Allentown Division 30-inch and 36-inch east side transmission main repair report. Seeking approval of the design phase of the work, the blue documents in our board package, digital board package, pages 127 to 130.
Okay, thanks, legal. Jason Peters is going to present this project. What this project is, I'll summarize it. It's a design project to repair the east side transmission main, and where the east side transmission main is located. It runs from the Allentown water filtration plant across the river, along Martin Luther King, across the river to the east side reservoir. So it's a very important, very critical transmission main. And this project, the scope of this project is based on a study that Operations commissioned, what's called a smart ball study. And what that is, it's insertion of a device into the main, a smart ball. It's an electronic device that measures, it detects leaks in the main. So what the study comprised of was insertion of this device at the water filtration plant, and then the device is conveyed along the direction of the flow to a place where the device is collected, and that was the air release valve manhole on the other side of the river. And before I talk about too much about the details, Jason, why don't you come sit up here? I know you were sleeping in the back.
Come on down.
I'm sleeping. I'll scoot up here.
Jason's gonna present the detail of the project.
Yeah, Chuck pretty much stole the thunder there, but it's all right. Back in June of 22, operations came to you guys to seek approval to start a study. Like Chuck alluded to, doing a smart ball insertion into the transmission main. It's a steel transmission main that's coated with material both inside and externally. And the purpose of that was to actually go ahead and take a look at the potentials of failure on that pipe, just like we did, the city of Allentown did prior to us taking over the system in the Shantz main, and look at what is there and what potential impacts are there on that main. Same thing was done here on this. This all wrapped up around that same time with the large break out at Martin Luther. Overall on Mac Boulevard, take a look at our key critical infrastructure, look to see if it needs any repair and or, hey, maintenance, go ahead and take a look at this. So that report really driven 6 leaks that were found on the system, like Chuck alluded to, from our water filtration plant over to the east side reservoir where it feeds. All these repairs are from water filtration up to right into Pine Valley wastewater treatment plant.
I have a question, just so I get oriented here. So this is a line that comes from the waterworks.
Yes.
And it goes where? Walk me through where it goes.
Good question, Ted. So it comes from water filtration plant down by our DMC.
Yeah.
Okay, runs on Martin Luther until it hits about where the ball fields are. You know
So
where
it's
the
going
little-
downstream.
Yes, heading east.
East, okay,
Dips across the Little Lehigh.
and south.
Right at Parkettes, and that's where the 36 to 30 inch changes, right there by Parkettes. Heads over through Klein's Island wastewater treatment plant property, crosses the Lehigh River, and goes to the east side reservoir. That's
Across the river near Klein's Island.
right at through the let's call it like the staging yard area. Right. So just north of the treatment plant.
Yeah.
And just south of Hanover.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great.
And I'll just add, as part of a recent main replacement project, we replaced a section of this very line right next to Klein's Island that had several breaks on it, and it was repaired several times over the years, and that was a high risk section. So it was on this same pipe. That was a 30 inch.
That was the section of 30 inch.
While we're asking questions, I'm just curious, was this study done with the pipe in service? Or how, could you just elaborate on how
So
detect leaks with the pipe full, or how did this all work?
So it was full and they gained entry points. I wish operations was here because they played a critical part. I think Chris Bogert did, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Entry through from air release chambers and also through other inserted corporations, correct?
Yeah, I don't know where they took it out of,
Right.
but they did install it at the water plant.
Yeah, filtration and then received it, I think, down at a release chamber, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a T that they could actually get the ball back.
How big is the device?
Oh, I personally haven't seen one.
All right.
I think it's about the size of like a cantaloupe, like a large.
Yeah. Football.
Like a football, yeah.
Yeah, definitely larger than a softball.
That's interesting. Yeah, cool.
So, that's, the study came out, we found 6 leaks on the system. And that's where we're looking to start a design and bid phase of this project and seeking approval from you guys for a capital project authorization in the amount of $104,300. $89,300 of that is professional service authorization to Kenneth Fleming for the design bid phases of that. And what they'll be doing is reviewing the report, determining the general locations of those repairs. Because from the smart ball report from the entry point, they can locate that where that leak is by lineal foot. So determine where those locations are, conduct survey of those areas to determine the scoping and nature of that repair that may be in that area. Dependent on, is it a T where it's a leak at a joint versus, hey, it's in a central part of the pipe that may need a different type of repair, okay?
What kind of pipe is this?
So it's steel pipe. I was actually out on the job site when we did the repair down at water filtration, at Kleinzon wastewater treatment plant earlier this year. It's actually a very thin steel pipe. It's got a coating of like a tarish type material on the outside. And it's got a little bit of like a paint lining on the inside, but it's generally, it's not like you're looking at ductile iron, which is probably 3 to 4 times thicker than this pipe.
Yeah, it's a cement lining, if I'm not mistaken. And all the leaks were graded medium to large leaks. I think there was one medium leak and the rest of the leaks were classified as large, which is in excess of 10 gallons per minute loss.
And how accurately can it pinpoint where the location is?
It's pretty accurate.
Really darn accurate. So when City of Allentown performed this on Sean's line, I played an integral part of that project through the construction phase. And where those actual leak sites were detected, they were surveyed, and that's where our contractor dug. And bingo. Very good, accurate report and location of those, and
And the pipe's operating,
yes,
so there's flow in the pipe,
yes.
Yeah.
and this thing can detect a leak.
But please don't ask us exactly how it works.
It's proprietary.
There you.
So if I'm not mistaken, it's more like ultrasonics, and you're reading noise chatter in the pipe. It's listening for like a scream or a leak in the pipe. And they give you this wonderful report, which I have here. And they actually give you readouts. Let me find the page here. It's kind of interesting to look at it.
Yeah.
Hold on. So there's a picture of the ball that we're talking about. Okay. And the graphics. So as you get closer to that noise, your graphics will actually locate like screaming leak in that area, and then it determines the volume or the gallons per minute where that.
You can actually do that too.
Yeah. So what we're seeking for is actually a capital project authorization for design bid phases of $104,300, and part of that is the professional service authorization to Gannett Fleming for $89,300.
Any other board questions? I have one. Are there any leaks under the river? I take it the pipe is buried in the across the river.
That's correct, and there is not. They did not find a leak in that area.
Praise the Lord.
Yes.
How far on the other side was that? Did it go? It didn't go all the way up to the reservoir, did it?
From what the report, what they did was it came real close to the reservoir. I think that's where they ended up pulling it out at the last portion, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right. Almost the entire line.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have before us a capital project authorization for the Allentown Water System 30 and 36-inch east side transmission main repair project design phase. It includes, let's see, for a total amount of $104,300 with a professional service authorization, again, of Fleming for $89,300. Need a motion and a second. Make a motion. Motion by Sean.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Mark, thank you for your second. All right, any questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you, Brian.
Good presentation, thank you. Okay, moving on the agenda, monthly project updates. Next, item number 6, information items. The first board meeting of the month. Digital board package pages 135 to 143. September 23rd, 2023 report was attached. It's white documents.
All right. So if you have had a chance to look at this report, you'll see there's a lot on the agenda for the next meeting. So
I thought this was a big.
I haven't seen December.
yeah, this meeting had long presentations. We're hoping that at the next meeting will be shorter because we have a number of projects to get through.
Yeah.
We will be asking for board approval of the budget at the next meeting. We also have a number of projects. So the Munis implementation project that Ed mentioned earlier, we're ready to ask for that project to move forward, along with a number of system projects like the manhole project. Park Pump Station is coming back for approval. And also the indenture upgrades or the architectural and structural upgrades. I have just a couple highlights I wanted to mention to you. We typically do our quarterly progress report for the strategic plan. We would do it in October. We're recommending, because October has a really full agenda, that we move that to November, and also be a good opportunity when Amir is back. Because we want to talk about how we're doing with safety, as well as how we're doing with our asset management program. And AJ has some new material to share, and thought it would be good for the full board to be there for that one in November. We also have an item on the agenda for, looks like it will not be for the meeting on the 23rd, but potentially in November. We have a intermunicipal agreement with Upper Macungie and Lower Macungie Township related to sewage transportation. And that's focused on that Upper Western Lehigh pump station project, where we're going to tie into an Upper Macungie Township trunk line as part of that project. So we want to keep that project moving, and we haven't agreed with that. We're just not sure on the timing.
Is that the force main through Grange Park?
Yes.
Yes. So that's, construction's a little ways away.
You'll be asking for authorization for the force main construction at the December.
Okay, good.
So we want to have the intermunicipal agreement in place before we tie into it.
That would be advised.
So, and if there's any questions on anything else in the report.
Sand Spring request come back.
The Sand Spring request will come back. We just need to have a little more internal dialogue on that one, and we're hoping that will be on the agenda as well. So get comfortable.
Okay,
That's all I have.
any questions? Next on the agenda, item number 9, staff comments.
And nothing.
What's our comments? No comments. Any public comments on any items whatsoever?
No, thank you, Brian.
Yep, no comments.
Thank you, Jenny and Brian. All right, board comments.
And the team, it's kind of my first run through with the LCA's budget. It was pretty exhaustive in a good way. Exhaustive, you can say that. Exhaustive and you know, fairly easy to understand. So I want to express my thanks to the team.
Very good. Any other comments from the board? All right, hearing none, we have no executive sessions, so at this point in time, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for everybody's attendance.